palace corridor was silent, save for the soft click of her shoes against the polished stone. Anne of Cleves didn't look back. Behind her, the court of Henry VIII had already begun whispering, some in pity, some in disbelief, and others in admiration. Ahead, freedom waited like a quiet promise. She had no crown, no husband, but she had her life, her dignity, and more wealth than any English noblewoman could dream. She was smiling. 6 months earlier, the air in court had crackled with urgency. Henry VIII, aging and growing ever more paranoid, had buried his third wife, Jane Seymour, after she died, giving him the son he so desperately needed. The child, Edward, was healthy, but the king, lonely and vulnerable, was restless. His ministers pressed him. England could not afford instability. A foreign alliance would bring security and Protestant favor. The French and Spanish were circling. Germany, through the powerful Duchy of Cleves, offered an answer. Anne of Cleves, a Lutheran princess, was of noble blood. More importantly, she was politically useful. But Henry was a man of appetites. He had to like what he saw, so he asked for a portrait. Hans Holbein, the most celebrated painter in Europe, traveled across the Channel and captured Anne's likeness. The image he returned with showed a woman of grace and solemnity. She was not seductive, not flashy, but there was warmth in her eyes and a steadiness in her frame. Henry was pleased. "Bring her," he ordered. "I will have her by spring." The wheels of history began to turn, and meanwhile was cautious. She had heard of Henry, his wives, his temper, his court of daggers and roses. But duty to her family demanded she go. At 24, she was not young by royal standards, but she was noble, unspoiled by scandal, and determined to do her part. She set sail in winter. The sea was unforgiving. She was seasick and exhausted upon arrival. English customs baffled her. She struggled with the language. Still, she carried herself with dignity. When she arrived at Rochester Castle to rest, she received word of an unannounced visitor. Henry, disguised in plain clothes, the king had come for a surprise meeting, hoping to catch a spark. He burst into the room, giddy, expecting romantic recognition, and curtsied politely, but without excitement. She did not know who he was. She was confused, formal. Henry's pride collapsed in that instant. "She is no maid so fair as she hath been painted," he growled that night. "I like her not." But treaties had been signed, gifts exchanged. The eyes of Europe were watching. He could not back out. On January 6, 1540, they were married. The ceremony was stiff. Henry barely looked at her. He performed his duties with mechanical reluctance. At night, he claimed he could not perform his husbandly duties. "She is no virgin, I am sure," he told Cromwell. "Her body is so slack and loose." It was a lie, and was untouched. But Henry needed an excuse. He was impotent, frustrated, and humiliated, and in private was confused. She had been told nothing. She tried to be cheerful. She played cards with him, learned English dances, adopted English fashion, wrote kind notes to his daughters. He remained cold. The marriage was doomed before it had begun. By spring, Henry was already eyeing a new flame. Catherine Howard, a young lady-in-waiting with laughter in her eyes and flirtation in every glance. The king wanted and gone. His ministers, fearing another disaster like Bullen, proposed a quiet annulment. The reasons were thin: lack of consummation, pre-contract rumors in Cleves, and mutual dissatisfaction. Anne was summoned. She listened. She asked questions. She spoke with poise. And then she agreed. "I have come to England willingly," she said, "and I shall leave this marriage in peace." In that moment, Anne of Cleves did what no other wife had dared. She bowed, but not to be broken. She walked away intact. Henry, thrilled by her compliance, showered her with titles, lands, jewels, and an allowance that exceeded even some of his nobles. She was granted Richmond Palace, Hever Castle, personal retinue, and most uniquely of all, the title the king's beloved sister. She had entered England as a foreigner. She stayed as royalty and became a fixture of the court, never threatening, always gracious. She dined with Henry's children, attended his festivals, wore velvet and pearls without envy. She was neither queen nor exile. She was something rarer, respected. When Catherine Howard married Henry, Anne congratulated her. In private, she observed Catherine's reckless behavior with quiet concern. "She plays with fire," she once whispered to a servant, "and fire does not forgive." Her words proved true. Catherine was accused of adultery, imprisoned, tried, beheaded, and did not gloat. She simply kept her distance. The years rolled on. Henry married once more, Catherine Parr, a wise and thoughtful woman, and kept a cordial friendship with her but knew better than to hover. She traveled often to her estates. She hosted banquets. She gave generously to the poor. English nobility, once wary of the German princess, now admired her. In 1547, Henry died and wore mourning black. She walked in the procession behind his children. She took no part in politics, but she remained a symbol of grace. Under Edward's reign, she lived quietly. Under Mary, she kept her head down, attending Mass when summoned but never provoking the Catholic Queen. Under Elizabeth, she faded further from court life. She never returned to Cleves. She never remarried. She lived, truly lived, in a way that none of Henry's other wives were allowed to. In July 1557, at the age of 41, Anne of Cleves passed away at Chelsea Old Manor. She died peacefully, surrounded by loyal servants. She was buried in Westminster Abbey. Her tomb remains modest, but dignified, not as queen, but as the only wife of Henry VIII who left with her head, her wealth, her name, and her peace. History called her plain. Fools called her dull. But Anne of Cleves was the wife who survived. She came with a portrait. She left with an empire, and a smile no king could ever take away.